Hi and welcome. This is Homebody Rundown and I'm HR. In this video, I am sharing some of the food I made while doing a 12-day pantry challenge. I just made that up. Over the summer, I spent a lot of time outside and not a lot of time cooking, so really started making a lot of the same quick things and utilizing more convenience foods. And with this challenge, I'm hoping to jumpstart getting back into the cooking things from scratch. I'm still going to the grocery store and getting groceries because if I'm at the store for something else, I'm going to get all the stuff I need. But any food items I will not be using for these 12 days. I really want to focus on pantry items and freezer items and clearing out space there. However, I did get and use coffee creamer and arugula, which probably cost around $8. And we went out as a family for dinner one night. Of course, I'm not showing all of the food we made and ate. A lot of stuff is just quick and easy, a sandwich, leftovers, a fried egg, that kind of thing. But if it had more than a few ingredients and took some effort, it is included here. Right now, our two oldest kids are off at college, so it's just myself, my husband, and youngest child. My husband and I eat a mostly pescatarian diet, so that's vegetarian with fish or seafood for us. Youngest child does eat chicken, but almost all the food you'll see in this video is vegetarian or mostly vegetarian. Sometimes there are tricky ingredients like natural flavorings and you don't really know what's in there. I really haven't had this bag of potatoes very long, but I always feel like I never get to them quite in time and lose a few. So I decided to wash up about half of the bag. I'm just cutting these into pieces and I'm going to roast them in the oven. Adding olive oil, a mix of black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, and this adobo seasoning that I get at Whole Foods. It's from Frontier brand. Youngest child is fairly picky, but she likes this adobo seasoning on here. Getting them into a single layer. And then this oven has a convection roast setting, so I'm going to try that. Well, I've used it before. This is a vegetarian meat product, so fake sausage. I am slicing up some smaller pieces for dinner tonight, but we won't eat all of it, so I'm leaving some of them longer so they can just be eaten later in the week for a quick lunch with a bun. And this is some avocado oil in a cast iron pan. These are frozen green peas. I used to always buy these at Costco, but I have not seen them at our Costco in months. So these are from Whole Foods. Just water and salt. And getting out this little floaty thing. I don't need to start these very early. This is an induction cooktop, so it boils things very quickly. Have to stand back here for a second to let the steam come out so I don't get burned. Just checking on these, they're looking pretty good. This is some chicken from the freezer. I tend to buy large quantities at Costco. I bake it all at once and then get it into smaller containers in the freezer so that I can just warm up what I need for whichever kids are at home and want chicken. I forgot about these, so they're a little more done than I usually do. Even though they're vegetarian, I still make sure they get hot enough in the centers. Just giving these a stir. They're looking good, but they're not quite soft enough yet. So I'll get them back in the oven for a few more minutes. Pulling out these sausages for later in the week. Mixing up one of my favorite drinks. This is fizzy water or sparkling water from the Soda Stream, and I mix it with this tart cherry juice I get at Walmart. It is also really good with the tart cherry juice and a touch of lime Topo Chico. It's not overly sweet. These are soft and done. They were delicious. Added a little sour cream and then some barbecue sauce to the sausages. This was a very quick dinner. I decided to make some bread. Sorry about the camera there. This is the Better Homes and Gardens new baking book. It's not really new. I got it when we got married. So it is copyright 1998. But I am following the recipe on this, but I'm using the alternative they have for replacing some of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour. You have to warm this stuff up on the stove. And I like to use a thermometer to make sure I get it to the right temperature. That's some sugar in with milk and butter. And this milk is some that I mixed up from a whole milk powder I ordered from Azure Standard. Also added in some salt and got that to the right temperature. This is part of the flour and the yeast. And now adding in the liquid ingredients. Scraping down the sides, which you do have to do on a KitchenAid mixer. Added in the rest of the flour. You can see part of this is whole wheat flour. It's a little more brown. And letting the mixer do all of the work. So I just spray a little oil over the top of the dough. I think you're supposed to put it into an oiled pan, but I just rub the oil all around. Covering it, and my oven has a proof function, so getting it in there because the house is probably a little chilly. Here's how it looks. Punching it down. And getting it out of the bowl onto a floured cutting board. At this point, I don't remember in the directions. It may say that you're supposed to knead it some more, but I don't do that. I try to avoid kneading anything if possible. I have a connective tissue disorder, so I have some joint problems. So if I can get away with it, I do not bother. Sprayed these loaf pans with avocado oil. Now I'll just adjust these so they fit better in the pans. And then they will go back into the oven to proof for longer. I expected them to rise more. I don't know if it's the wheat flour or the yeast I used. It wasn't labeled. It was in the refrigerator, so I'm not sure if it was instant yeast or regular yeast, and it was probably very old. But these are baked now and they look fine. They are darker in color because of that whole wheat flour. I like to use the offset spatula to go around the edges after it's cooled for a few minutes. And spraying that avocado oil usually does the trick, and these come right out. So they do look very crusty on top. It was a pretty hard top crust. But it was fine inside. It was soft in the middle. It was just that top edge is pretty thick. I'm not sure if that's mostly the whole wheat flour or I just baked it too long. So now I'm going to try a piece with some homemade strawberry jam that was gifted to us. And of course it was delicious. Probably mostly due to the strawberry jam. For dinner tonight, I'm going to make some pasta sauce and spaghetti. I like to use strained tomatoes and tomato paste. I'm also going to add a Beyond Meat burger. This adds a meaty flavor. I don't need it, but my husband and when the boys are home, they like that. This is some roasted garlic that I got out of the freezer. This had defrosted a little bit, so I am adding some olive oil and using this meat masher thing to break it up into pieces. Adding in Italian seasoning, some red pepper flakes, and some onions that I cut up earlier in the day. This is the roasted garlic and the tomato paste. This is a very heavy on tomato products kind of sauce. Here's how it looks when it's all stirred together, and then I'll let this simmer for a little while. Making up the spaghetti now, I do heavily salt the water. Just turn this off, it's done, and I will get it drained. I added some vegetarian Parmesan cheese. I get this at Whole Foods. This was really good. Making another vegetarian meat meal. It's unusual for me to make this many in a week's time, but I'm trying to use up some things in the freezer, and my husband likes these. I really am not a big fan of this one, but it's called Beyond Steak, and it does brown up nicely. I do use a lot of oil, usually avocado oil. I'm also cooking it with some onions and the Kinder wood-fired garlic seasoning. This is sharp cheddar that I'm just going to let melt on here for a few minutes. And I had some sweet Hawaiian rolls in the freezer, so I got those out and defrosted them and put them in the pan just so they could warm up from the refrigerator. Making little sandwiches with mayo and roasted red peppers. I have a lot of dried beans and legumes to use up, so today I'm making split pea soup using some of this umami blend. It's a mushroom seasoning. It's almost gone. I'll have to get out a new one. And this black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder mix is almost gone as well. My favorite bouillon is this Edwards & Sons not chicken bouillon. And I'll add some lactose-free milk at the end. I'm using up these cartons of shelf-stable milk. They are expiring this month anyway, so it worked out for the Pantry challenge. Forgot to show it, but I'm also adding roasted garlic powder. Rinse the peas and adding the seasonings now. Then I'll just cook these in some water and keep an eye on it. To go along with the soup, I'm going to make a sandwich. This is some of the homemade bread, and I'm going to use the vegetarian steak and onions from last night. The metal tray I'm making the sandwich on goes inside our toaster oven / air fryer. This is some more of that sharp cheddar cheese. Checking the soup and just smushing the peas against the side to see if they are smushable, and they were, so it's done. And I tasted it, it needed a little more seasoning. And checking on the sandwich, everything looks toasty good. This has been cooling down for a few minutes and I'm adding in some milk. I like to use the immersion blender, but you have to be really careful. It does splatter and it could burn you. This is some barbecue sauce on the sandwich, and I added some Parmesan cheese to the soup. The soup turned out really well. On this day, I wanted to make some flatbreads, and I'm making a recipe that I'm pretty sure I made it once before. It's out of this America's Test Kitchen book. I am not going to link it because I didn't follow the instructions and it did not go well, but I'm still going to show it. I mean, it still made bread and we ate it, but I don't want to insult America's Test Kitchen by implying that I made what they said. I didn't. This is all the liquidy ingredients and the salt and sugar. Here's the flour. And that's where I really think I made the biggest mistake. It is supposed to be bread flour and whole wheat flour, and I just used all-purpose flour. And you can see it right here. It's way too wet. So I did add in more flour to try to get it to pull away from the sides. So I just went ahead and put it in the oven to proof. And it is very sticky looking. It should not, at least most of the breads I make, it should not be this sticky and should not stick to the sides of the bowl like that. And see how stretchy it is and gooey. It's a mess. So I added a lot of flour, well, I thought it was a lot of flour, to the outside so that I could cut it into pieces. And I was able to do that. Now, I do, like I said earlier, try to avoid kneading dough. And I also try to avoid rolling it out. So I thought, oh, I will put these in the tortilla press and just not push it down really far. I don't want it to be super thin. I just want to get kind of a round, flat shape. Getting the cast iron ready with some oil. So I've got parchment paper here. And I did not apply much pressure. And this is what I got. So I added more flour to the outside, like really coated it, and it still stuck. I mean, it was a little better. And then just look at this hot mess all over my counter. Oh my gosh. Husband was around, so he came to the rescue and kneaded in some more flour. And then he just used his hands to press out some flat shapes. So got them toasting in the cast iron. And we did use a fork to poke holes in it, like the directions said. This is how they looked, and it does recommend that you serve them with butter, maybe butter and salt, which is excellent. They turned out great as far as flavor. This is my typical breakfast, so I just thought I'd show you that. And it's all stuff I have had in the house for a long time. So it's quick oats, cinnamon, honey. This is some flaxseed. I just use the kettle to get some hot water. And usually I add in the raisins before I add the hot water. I just forgot, so added in the raisins. And then these are, I think on this day I was using up the last of the toasted walnuts. Typically I do toasted pecans. That's my favorite. Another thing I like to do is defrost some frozen fruit and then mash it up so that it's ready to go in yogurt. This is the next day and I am making some lunch. Going to use up the rest of those potatoes from the bag. Went to the freezer and got spinach, and while I was down there I got out some donuts that I had and some refried pinto beans. Those will just defrost and we can use them later in the week. Going to make mashed potatoes with these. So getting them in some salted water. And to the spinach I'm going to add onion and kidney beans. My husband and I really like onions, so I add them to almost everything. This is for the spinach. I'll cook the onions for a few minutes first. I really like this Jovial brand kidney beans. They are in a glass jar, so it doesn't taste like metal can, which I'm a big fan of. And the quality has always been really good when I've gotten these. I can find them at Whole Foods. And I'm pretty sure Azure Standard sells a lot of Jovial products. So I just got them out of the jar and we'll give them a rinse. Here's what they look like. So they're not just a mushy mess. They still have a good structure to them. Adding in that frozen spinach now, and we'll let that saute with the onions. Well, not right now. I had to turn things off so I could go to the community college and pick up youngest child from class. And now I'm back, and we'll get things going again. Getting those kidney beans in there just to get warmed through with the veggies. And this is the first time I'm making this Frontier brand no chicken vegetarian gravy mix. I ordered this from Azure Standard. It's expensive, but I thought I'd give it a try. Adding some more seasonings to the spinach and onions and beans. Potatoes are done, so I'll get those drained. And I'll add seasonings. I usually just do salt and black pepper, sometimes some garlic powder or roasted garlic powder, butter, and the butter I have is unsalted. And then I'm adding, to make these a little more decadent, I'm adding sour cream, Greek yogurt, and half and half. Now, if I'm making a lot, I will put these in the KitchenAid, but this is just a small amount. And they were delicious. The gravy is done. I mean, this is my plate. I added roasted red peppers to it. The gravy was okay. All right, this is a ton of ingredients, but it comes together pretty quick because it's mostly just dumping out a bunch of spices. So I'm making some tikka masala. I'm pretty much following a recipe that I will link below, but be aware I am not following it exactly because I don't have cauliflower. So I'm using green peas instead of frozen cauliflower or fresh cauliflower. I don't know what you're supposed to have. I love the color of all these spices together though. And then I have some onion over here. Chopped up the last of the baby carrots in the refrigerator. or the old baby carrots. We don't really get through a whole bag anymore. So I will cook this in avocado oil with the seasonings. This is the ginger that is from the freezer, tomato paste, and garlic powder. That's another way. I didn't follow the recipe. I did not have fresh garlic. Here is the stock I made. And instead of cauliflower, I'm adding in frozen peas. Also added in tomatoes, but I'm not adding in as many tomatoes as the recipe calls for. Some lemon juice. And the diced green onions are not part of this recipe. I just had them in the refrigerator and didn't want them to go bad. This is chickpeas and coconut milk. This is the bread that we made last night, and it was really good dipped into the sauce. This turned out great, but I really didn't like those green onions in here. I would not do that again. Forgot to show it, but I did get out and defrost some chocolate chip cookies from the deep freeze. Going to make a chocolate cake today. This is a Whole Foods box cake mix. The only thing I'm going to do different is add a tablespoon of cocoa powder. I'm hoping that it'll just give it a stronger chocolate flavor. I don't know if it'll be noticeable. Just a simple box cake mix, couple eggs, water, oil, and then I'm adding in that extra cocoa powder. I like to make these in the KitchenAid. It does a great job whisking things like this. I used avocado spray oil on this glass 9x13 dish. While that's baking in the oven, I am using the food processor to chop up the pecans that I toasted in the oven. I really like to have these to add to oatmeal and to yogurt with fruit. I just store them in quart jars in the refrigerator. Just making up this casserole dish. I had some leftover pieces of bread in the refrigerator, so I'm going to attempt to make a breakfast type casserole. Typically with extra bread, I make a French toast casserole, but we are out of syrup. So this is some sharp cheddar cheese, eggs, roasted red peppers that I had in the refrigerator. This is some of the homemade bread, a couple leftover Hawaiian rolls, and one hot dog bun. Got all the seasonings in here. It's garlic powder, onion powder, nutritional yeast, dried parsley, salt, pepper, and that's black pepper. And I only have one onion left, so I'm saving it. So I'm going to use this dehydrated onion. I don't use it very often, so I'm not really sure how much to use. But I just sprinkled that in with the cheese and the red peppers and the diced up bread, and pouring this egg mixture over the top. I also added a little half and half to the eggs. Just trying to work it in a little bit so there aren't really dry pieces of bread, and putting the last of the cheese on top. The cake is done, so I can get the casserole in the oven with some foil over the top. This is a new to us frosting, Miss Jones Baking Co. chocolate frosting. I have seen this at Whole Foods for a long time, but it was really expensive, so I could never bring myself to buy it. But it was at Walmart when I went last time, so I picked one up. It is, I think it's all natural ingredients, but it looks really thick. All right. I was just about to start spreading it, and then I saw it had directions, and it said to warm it in the microwave. So I don't warm stuff in plastic usually, so I put it in a glass bowl, and that made a huge difference. Now it looks more like regular canned frosting. This is going on super smoothly. I did taste it. and it's okay. It's a very fatty frosting, I would say, and it's palm oil, I think. And it's not bad, it's just, I guess I just prefer homemade frosting. Or butter. I think I just prefer butter. But I think I'll try the vanilla and see how that one is. The cake was really good. I think it did have a stronger chocolate flavor. And just another note about the frosting, we keep cake in the refrigerator. We don't go through it really quick. And this frosting does set up kind of hard. It doesn't stay soft in the refrigerator. Here's the casserole, and it had really good flavor. I think I forgot to mention I used the Kinder's wood-fired garlic for the salt in this. The only thing was that it was just way too much bread. With that amount of eggs, I should have used maybe like half the amount of bread, so you got a stronger egg flavor. But it's a good way to use up leftover bread. For dinner tonight, I got a lot of things out of the freezer. Some leftover rice from the tikka masala. These peppers are from the freezer. The corn is left over. The refried beans are from, I think I made them a couple weeks ago. And then I just got this shredded Colby Jack out of the freezer as well. While I was down there, I pulled out this mac and cheese. This is homemade mac and cheese, so it can start defrosting. Cooking the veggies with some avocado oil. Here's some seasonings, and I'm also going to add garlic, those chopped onions, or dehydrated chopped onions, and some nutritional yeast. Getting the dried seasonings in there. The green in here is dried cilantro, and there's some smoked paprika. Then the beans from the freezer, the rice, and canned enchilada sauce. I didn't add all of it to start with, but I hate when this reheats and it's dry, so I went ahead and added the rest. If you're watching sodium, you would want to pay attention to this, as some of these sauces can have quite a bit. Putting some of the shredded cheese over the top, and I'll put that in the oven for a little while. And while that's going in the oven, I'm making quesadillas for youngest child. And here is the finished casserole. This was really good. And it's very easy if you have, beans and sauce ready to go. And it does reheat well. The quesadillas are done. These were just beans and cheese. And they are nice and melty. Making pizza dough on this day. I thought I still had some 00 pizza flour. I don't know how you're supposed to say that, but it works really well. I really like it, but I couldn't find any, so I must have, I don't know. I want to say I used it up, but of course I'll probably find it in a couple weeks after I buy more. So today I'll just use all-purpose flour. And the recipe I'm following is a King Arthur recipe. I am following it exactly, and I will link it below if I can find it online. I think it does say the olive oil is optional, but I always add it. Getting everything mixed in the KitchenAid with the dough hook. This needs for a while, so I am very grateful to have a mixer that can do this work for me. I do put some spray oil on it and form it into a ball. Then it was proofing in the oven. Looks good. And definitely not as sticky as the last dough I made. Sometimes I do wear gloves just to save my hands some hand washing. I have really dry skin and it tends to crack and bleed. dividing it into 4, and this is my husband rolling it out for me. These are very thick, so either I would roll them into bigger crusts or just divide it into more pieces and roll them more thinly next time. Although youngest child loved the thick crust on the cheese pizza, but it's just way too much for me. I'm really eating pizza for the topping, not the bread. This is the Whole Foods brand pizza sauce. I did a comparison with the kids with the Rayos, and they like the Whole Foods brand pizza sauce better. Saved the last onion for this night so I could saute these up with some salt and oil and put them on a couple of these pizzas. These are Kalamata olives. They are crazy salty. I think I just prefer the Libby's black olives. This is goat cheese from the freezer, and it was still a little frozen, so I couldn't get it broken into really small pieces. Adding some mozzarella and some Parmesan, red pepper flakes, and red peppers. Here's how the cheese pizza turned out. The crust was fantastic, very soft. It's a very soft crust. And I really like mixing the mozzarella and the Parmesan cheese. Here's a pizza with the extra ingredients on top, and you can see here the crust was very thick. Delicious, but it was thick. I'm going to add this glaze, this balsamic glaze, and then this is something I did purchase. This is arugula, because I just love this combination on pizza. And arugula is my favorite lettuce because it has such a strong flavor, a strong peppery flavor. And here's how this looked up close. Really good. I'm really glad I decided to challenge myself to not use new groceries and focus on what was already in the house. And it was nice to have some foods that I haven't made in a while and to have lots of leftovers in the refrigerator. We really got away from that over the summer. I picked up some new cookbooks from the library, and I'm feeling motivated to try some new recipes as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.